Regional differences in China. Now this is thoughtful. Hello, I'm Kitty Boo in Shanghai. Advertisers typically divide China into 5 or 6 tiers, starting with sophisticated Tier 1 markets, Beijing, Shanghai, and Guangzhou, and going down to rural villages. Their reasoning is based on the belief that an educated white-collar worker in Guangzhou has more in common with Shanghai's middle-class consumers than a farmer in rural Guangdong. There are valid reasons for this, but it's not the whole story. This week on Thoughtful China, our guests will help you understand the regional differences that determine what Chinese buy and consume. And Linda Korarik will share a thought or two about the questions you should be asking about local consumers. But first with us is Ram Narayan, Unilever's VP of Brand Building for Foods and Refreshment in China. Welcome to our studio.
Thank you very much.
So today our topic is about regional differences. When marketers go into a market, I realize they often go by tiers. Should that be the only approach?
Well, it depends on the category that you're working with. So for foods, for example, apart from tier, we also work on different regions because there are different cuisines in China, and different parts of China favor different cuisines. And so it would be imperative to kind of take that into consideration if one is working in the foods categories.
What are the regional differences for foods?
There are lots of differences, and I think given the kind of scope of that topic, one could talk about hours. But let me kind of explain what we do with one of our brands on Knorr. So on Knorr, for example, we know that for Knorr, we take top dishes that are relevant for the regions, to specific regions. So in the north, we talk about dumplings and the role of our Knorr bouillon on how it can make dumplings tasty and juicy. But when it comes to east, we talk about soupy noodles. And when it comes to south, we talk about soupy vegetables. Because each area, the top dish for that particular region is different. And so for us to then find a way so that consumers really learn to love the brand, it makes sense to then connect with the top dish that they favor.
What about ice cream, for example? Are there regional differences in this product, or is it more about seasonality?
Well, I think the dominant one in ice cream is seasonality, because the window for ice cream is fairly is very, very sharp. But I'm sure there is also regionality involved, because we have so many players who are very, very localized, very, very regional specific. So there must be regionality. But I think the dominant factor in ice cream is that it is really, really seasonal.
In terms of understanding regional differences and developing products and marketing strategies for each local market, who do you think does better? Is it multinationals or is it local companies?
Well, the advantage is always companies who are based in China because they know the cuisine so much better, and the companies that are based out of a particular region because they have such good understanding of the taste, the palate, the flavor, the texture. So obviously they have an advantage. But I think as companies are kind of learning to do business and kind of finding their way through, they are evolving and they are also learning about the differences.
So you mean that the multinationals are actually gradually picking up on this kind of cultural differences and then the regional differences?
For sure.
Okay. And often we talk about tiers, however many tiers that each company defines the China market. But in terms of strategy, it's often a combination of two, isn't it? It's not just about tiers or just about regional differences.
Well, it has to be because one has to find the particular segment that is relevant for the brand, and a tier plus region becomes a kind of a cell which you then identify which cells work best for your brands. So it is indeed a combination. It's not only consumers. Yes, consumers are the starting point, but it's also about channels and customers through which we work with, supply chain, manufacturing, sales team. So it's the entire value chain, and that has to revolve around the strategy for the brand, and that then depends on what segments you choose to focus on.
So it's quite a daunting task, actually, when you think about the size of the market. How do you collect data, and how do you do your research to make sure that your understanding of each different region is accurate? And how
Accuracy is not something that is easy to come by. But in terms of understanding, well, there's no better way to understanding than just going and spending time and spending a kind of quality time with consumers, with people. But then there are also formal research tools, and we have quite a few combinations of qualitative, quantitative research by province, by city tier, and then depending on where the brand wants to focus on, we take a combination of that.
Thank you for being on Thoughtful China today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me on the show.
To begin to understand the regional differences across China, you just need to look at the cuisine. The hot, spicy dishes of Hunan and Sichuan stand in stark contrast to the milder, simpler tastes of the South, or the more hearty, rustic staples of the North. The question, though, of whether regional differences translate into marketing opportunity or just add to the clutter of trying to understand and break through in China is really category and resource dependent. McDonald's, for example, has long embraced a regionalized operating model, which varies menu mix based on regional tastes. Likewise, in a country with extreme humidity on one end and extreme dryness on the other, it would make absolute sense for skincare brands to offer products that don't just suit the skin type, but suit the climate. Most marketers today, however, other than those with scale, simply aren't equipped to treat China as a collection of separate territories, perhaps to their detriment. Traditionally, segmentation in China has been based on the tier system or relative economics. McKinsey, however, tells us that as wealth continues to spread, over 1 billion people are projected to be living in urban centers by 2030. So consideration of regional idiosyncrasies are certainly becoming more important in optimizing marketing strategies. So what may seem impractical today may become necessity in the future, which makes this a topic to keep a thoughtful eye on.
With us now is Baiping Shen, Chief Strategy Officer, China, Low & Partners Worldwide, Catalina Camarata, Director of Human Experience Strategy and Starcom Media Vest Group, and Cindy Yang, Director at Nielsen China. Welcome to our studio today. So today our topic is looking at Chinese consumers from a more geographic location rather than the usual tier approach. So in your experience, what are some of the top categories in which regional differences is a major part?
I think it's mainly the food and beverage. Yeah, but also can be some like a household or personal care products as well. Mm-hmm.
I can think of toiletries too. So, for example, the skin type of North versus Southern people are different due to the climate. It's more dry, of course, in the North. So they would look for more moisturizing product versus the South is really going to focus more on skincare. So that's a big difference for them, the kind of products that they use. Also, there's a cultural difference if you think about male skincare products specifically. Mm-hmm. So we know that the northern men are like the macho of China, mm-hmm. Versus the southern men more metrosexual, more sophisticated. So we have actually experienced how in the south area, men are willing to really use a wider range of skincare products, whereas in the north are a little bit more reluctant to do so.
Yeah, I totally agree with the two ladies what they say. And but the way I think the question always try to rephrase is, are we talking about the strategy or the execution? Tend to be different because it's always come back to what really the company need to spend money and get a return, efficiency. That's the issue. So. At the strategy level, tend to be get what's really the fundamental needs for the market, skincare or food, fundamental needs. Then in execution, the product execution, then can be allowed to be regionally different. For example, like I know it's understanding in talking about the skincare, and the girl in north tend to be used a lot because the weather is dry, easy to lost moisturization, so they put a lot on that. And the food, talk about ice cream, they have two peak seasons in the northeast, because winter season, outside is minus 30 degrees, the inside is like 30 degrees because warm keep outside. Then people either get thirsty. Instead of drinking water, they just pumping into ice cream. So that's really but fundamentally, you talk about measured needs. Still quite same. China is one country anyway.
Yeah, but I agree with you. I think it's all about how to meet consumer needs because China is so big. It definitely has a regional difference. I think especially if you are like food or beverage manufacturers, you really need to pay much attention on that. I give you some examples like beverage. Like in the last 2 years, pear juice is extremely popular in China, but where is it? Especially in the north. Because in the north, people cough a lot, and there's big wind, bad weather. So pear juice actually has much more higher importance in the north versus south.
So do you think marketers are really paying enough attention to the regional differences, or are they too tier focused?
I think they are still tier focused, but because they need to be efficient. And I think regional differences alone would not be helpful to marketers. We need to think about China in terms of a matrix where two dimensions of regional differences and tier difference both matter. To make just an example, we can think about a region that has the same climate, the same culture, the same geographical position, but there might be enormous differences if you are in Shanghai or in a rural part of close to Shanghai. Why? Because consumers are less familiar with brands, and the degree of familiarity with brands and with advertising would generate exactly different, extremely different responses to marketing and to brands. So this is still happening. Regional and tiers are both important, but in the name of the efficiency, marketers are still focusing on tiers. It's a strategy for them to penetrate the market, and it does work.
So we touched on the regional differences because the climate is different, the humidity, and so on. So what are the cultural things that makes a province different from the other? What are some of the cultural differences that you can think of among different provinces in China?
I did once the study only look at from the girl in different region. Like
that's a fun study to do.
Yeah, it's it's go in Beijing. They grow up in the capital city. They see everything. Then they have kind of what we call the big heart is kind of a little bit not looking for small things, and the easy to get on the big picture. Fall in love with a very wholeheartedly, then they can very determined to break the relationship. So then people in Shanghai, the girl in Shanghai is different. It's more might be very careful to say the words here. And they're very stylish. They know exactly clearly what they want, and in the relationship they calculate the consequences very carefully. So like people in Chengdu, the girl in Chengdu, they just like a pepper, like what they eat is a kind of temper can be explosive. They also can be very gentle, can be very stylish. So different region. Why we call in China as 一方水土养一方人呢? You drinking that water, you grow up there, then become different the people. It's different. Then you really see. You talk to the people from different. It's really different. So that's really affect the way their lifestyle, how they deal with the people, how they accept others. It's a local culture. So that's a big topic in a local culture. But good things they speak one language, so also have some values across the country. Yeah.
I'm thinking of the luxury category, for example, speaking of North and South. So in terms of luxury, the North and the South, they have very different approach. So the North are Northern people, Dongbei people, more influenced by Russian culture. So they really are about big logos, show off, bling bling. Whether the Southern people, they're a little bit more sophisticated and they like to go low profile. relatively lower profile. So that's another difference that they have. So it's a big show-off personality, or really making a statement in a more subtle way. This is something that we have, investigated with luxury.
Yeah, I'm thinking about the self-expression. Like in the North, people likely to overstate something. Well, in the South, they're more be realistic or practical. So when you ask people, for example, if you do a survey, North people or South people, actually you need to justify by understanding their culture difference.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And in the North, people will, if I ask you to do something, you without thinking, oh, no problem, I do it.
But then instead, they
then
don't
turn around,
deliver.
they forgot what you asked for. Then there's people in the South, okay, let me think about it, and but they will do it.
Sorry to interrupt, but we don't have a whole lot of time left.
Okay, that's good.
One last question. How does media play a role in this? Should ads be localized?
I don't believe they should be localized. Unless you have an endless budget. I think, though, we need to think that ads are just one part of the marketing mix. So there are a whole lot of other tools that we can use to create that experience with our consumers. So promotions, also in-store, on-trade, off-trade, depending on the category. I just don't think it's an efficient use of our clients' money to ask them to localize their ads.
Yeah, definitely it's not a practical way from ROI perspective.
If you're local, the brand is a local brand, then you should localize to the maximum, just as localized as possible, because only you talk about, then the local people will like it, because this is our brand. So not national brand.
Yeah, but maybe from language perspective, in Guangdong, I assume ads are more in Cantonese, right? Where other places are more in Mandarin. So maybe from more bigger.
Advertising laws not allow those happen.
Okay then.
But still, I think there are different ways to send a message or talk with your consumer in a more personal way, beyond the ads or the TVC or the print ads. So you can localize in a smarter way, just not necessarily through ads.
Well, Cindy, Katerina, and Beiping, thank you for being on Thoughtful China today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That wraps it up for today. Be sure to subscribe to us on Youku and YouTube. You can also follow us on Weibo and Twitter and join our LinkedIn group. See you again.